Have you ever wondered why you are working so hard and not seeing any improvements in your job, or wondering why you feel so disconnected with your life? Well, in this podcast episode, we speak to Julie Jo Hughes, a successful performer, about her journey and how she came back in alignment with her true self after being stopped in her tracks. I can't wait for you to listen to this whole episode. Welcome, Julie Jo, to the Miles To Zen podcast. I am so thrilled to have you here with us today.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
Julie Jo and I met back in the fall, and we took a podcasting class together. We also meet every Thursday to discuss podcasting, but we end up having the most amazing discussions. And Julie Jo also has her own podcast called Star Potential, but there's so much more to Julie Jo than that. And Julie Jo, why don't you introduce yourself?
Thank you so much. Yes, I'm Julie Jo Hughes, and I have been a lifelong performer. I'm always looking for ways to creatively express myself. And in the fall was the first time I kind of stepped into a form of expression that's just me. And, all the years prior to that, I've done all kinds of acting, everything from commercials to theater to musical theater, cruise ships, film. I've done a little bit of everything, primarily a stage performer, but the majority of my career has been singing work. I began as a singer doing ensemble shows. And so singing, dancing, I also do voiceover work, but all of that has been me playing roles. And I found that I wasn't just playing roles on stages, but I was also playing all these roles in my daily life. And so as I began to explore my own authenticity and searching for what is my purpose, what am I really doing here? Who am I
Yeah.
actually? That expression became, what if I created my own show of some sort where I'm not playing any kind of a role? I'm just myself, and we ask questions about the meaning of our existence. What are we doing here? Who are we really? How do we relate to each other? And that's kind of how Star Potential was born.
And it's such a you're just a perfect fit for a guest on my podcast because it's all about curious, creative, and connected. And you're checking
Totally.
all the boxes. And I love the curiosity that you're bringing to this stage of life. It's just so cool, but also the how you're bringing it forward with fun and playfulness, right? I mean, we laugh our heads off every Thursday,
Yes,
which is
we do.
great.
That's why it's been so important for us not to miss it. It just like keeps the fun in the
Yeah.
learning curve, right?
Yeah, and I think we'll get into that in a little bit. And so I think that for anyone listening, I feel there's going to be a number of different things that you'll get out of the conversation today, and we'll just see how it goes. Like settle yourself in with a coffee and be part of our chat. I would like to really understand and have our audience know about your journey that got you into the creative's career, and then a little bit more about what was it, or a moment in time that where you're realizing that maybe you're walking in the wrong direction. And then we can, if we still have time, go into some of our funny stories around launching a podcast, because we may just have to come back for a second time to share with people how to launch a podcast if they're really interested, because
Totally.
it's full of little potholes.
It totally is. We had no idea what we were getting ourselves into.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, great. Yeah. So if we rewind back to little Julie Jo growing up on a farm in Iowa, I always just felt a little, I guess, different. I wasn't sure if I was completely relatable to others. And it kind of led to a long journey of, I guess, trying, always kind of measuring and trying to decide whether I wanted to fit in or if I was okay
Right.
standing out
Right.
and being
Right. Oh,
different,
I understand that completely. Yeah.
Yes. And so exploring that as a young child, it often meant entertaining people. And I noticed that when I made people laugh or I captivated their attention in some way, it got me this, like, I didn't have this label for it, but it was this giant dopamine hit for me. It was like, oh, it's like applause. It was just life-giving to me that when I would just express and then people would give back this happy energy back to me. And so I wanted to keep giving and receiving. That's an awesome feeling. It kind of started with, just family dinners and things. I used to do these really silly things to just the grown-ups were talking and I kind of wanted to be a part of that, but I didn't really understand what they were talking about. So I would break up that wall by coming in and pretending like I was a fly on the kitchen table or something, and I would jump into their lap and like start doing fly things and just to make them laugh. And then suddenly I'm part of it. I'm not left out
Right.
anymore.
Right.
As a child in elementary, there's a vivid story that I talked about in one episode where the teacher left the room and it was just like uncomfortable tension in the room. Everybody's not sure what to do because nobody's watching us for a minute. We didn't know how long the teacher was going to be gone. And I had never done this before. I don't know where it came from, but I jumped up in front of the class and I started impersonating Elvis Presley. And it's like, where did that come from? But I was just singing and dancing and everybody was laughing and it felt really cool. And so as I got into high school and things, that turned into doing lots of skits for the student body. I used to do comedy routines in one of my classes. And so now we're going to fast forward a bit to when it was time to go to college. I knew I wanted to do some type of performing, but it was like, well, how do I narrow down to which type of performing? So I felt like I would get a degree in whatever area I felt like I needed the most training or I hadn't had as much training. And so I felt like I could use more acting training. So I went into theater. And then after 4 years of doing straight theater, realized my heart was really in music.
Oh,
And so a lot of my expression has kind
your
of been,
inner Elvis Presley.
yeah, exactly. Like trying things and figuring out what I missed, I guess. And it was like, oh, when I do this, I actually miss doing this. And that was kind of what led me to going more primarily music. Now, the cool thing about music is that you can integrate acting, dancing, all these other performing arts skills into your music. And
Yeah.
all of the performing arts are a little bit that way, but I feel like music especially, you can bring in all the creative elements. And so now we're going to fast forward to it's one thing to pursue all of this when you're a single person, just moving to whatever city you want in the world and pursuing that. But when I met my husband and started a family, suddenly I had different parameters
Yeah.
and my priorities started shifting, but I wasn't, for a while, I guess I wasn't sure what the priorities were.
Yeah.
And I know we've talked about this before that it just starts becoming different as a mom. You start realizing all this stuff that's always been super important to me, it's now second or third or
Yeah.
fourth
Yeah.
compared to these relationships and these
Yeah.
people in my life. And that's the way you want it to be.
Yeah.
But then what do my new priorities look like? Like how do we make both of these things happen? Because I knew I didn't want to throw performing out the window because then I don't feel like myself anymore.
Right. I was just listening to a podcast and they were talking about your three priorities and you've got being in alignment with you and things feeling okay inside of you, like put your oxygen mask on first. And
Yes.
then for her, the second priority was family. And then the third
Yes.
priority was her life's work and her purpose. And I
Mhm.
thought, well, I can relate with that. That aligns with where I'm at as well. But it
Yeah.
is weird because up until that time, it's all you, right? And
Yes. Yes.
then your choices, you still have millions of choices, but you've got millions less as well.
Yes. Yes, it's true. That's true because everything has now shifted. It's like
Yeah.
you're looking through a different colored gel,
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
for a lighting term. And yeah, it took me a long time to realize that the reason why I started feeling frustrated, it's not like it was because of the kids or my marriage. It was that my priorities really had shifted, but I was still kind of measuring what I was doing and achieving in the world according to my old priorities. And it just took quite a bit of internal turmoil for me to see and accept that
Yeah.
my priorities had shifted and that I am in peace with that, you know?
Right. Yes.
And
Yes.
it actually doesn't mean that I had any less tenacity, grit, or drive. It's just that my priorities were different. And so then the goals shift also. And then I started doing more voiceover work. I started to look for how can I try to earn the same kind of money through gigs I was doing in the past, but not travel as much because
Right.
I like
Right.
being home with my kids every
Yeah.
night and things
Yeah.
like that. And both of our kids were born in New York City. That's where I met my husband. So the entire family was born and started while I was in New York City. I went to New York when I was 27. As a 27-year-old single female, it was different in New York City than by the time I
Sounds
left.
super fun.
It was super fun. But yes, by the time I'm leaving, I'm let's see, was I 34 or 35? Something like that, married with two kids. That's a different thing now, you know?
Yeah. Oh,
And
yeah.
we we started craving kind of a different lifestyle for our growing family, and we moved all the way across the country to Orange County, California, and both my husband and I both had kind of hustle type jobs. So we came here and it was like starting over from scratch again. And our littlest was just 8 months when we left. So still breastfeeding. And here I am trying to reestablish myself as a musician and connected performer in this whole new area that's not even a city anymore. Now we're like in suburbia, USA. And how do I get out and market myself now while still being present for the kids? The answer is I didn't really know. I had to
Yeah.
fall on my face forward until I figured out how you do that. There was a lot of days of feeling super guilty, like I'm not really doing anything for my career, and I was a bad mom today because I'm tired and not present, because I was out
Yeah.
till 2 a.m. last night trying to network with people. It was just like,
Well, and the early years are tough anyways with
yes,
kids because it's such an adjustment and you're so tired.
yes, that's a lot of it, is you're just
Yeah.
exhausted.
Yeah. And so your brain, your neurons aren't firing the way they normally do.
Yes. Yes. And so it was really just like I had blinders on, and it was like just hustle, 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 work hard. And if I work harder than anyone else and sleep less than anyone else and, just push myself harder than anyone else,
Right.
then it's inevitable that I must be rewarded with some great gigs, money,
Yeah.
recognition, fame, something. But the harder I worked, the unhappier I was feeling.
Yeah.
And until one day I finally broke, and it was like, there's got to be another way. And that brokenness for me was losing my voice for the first time in my life. And I'm not talking about I had a little tickle. This was like I woke up one day, I felt really sick. I knew I shouldn't do a show, but there wasn't really a backup plan because the money wasn't even good enough that it was worth like training someone to fill in for me if I couldn't be there. And so there
Right.
just wasn't a backup plan. So I did this gig that I shouldn't have done, lost my voice, thought maybe it would be a day or two. But by the time it reached day 6 or 7, when I could not even whisper without pain, like I knew we were in
Wow.
big trouble.
Yeah. That's the universe throwing the gauntlet down,
It totally
especially
was.
for you as a performer. I mean,
Mhm.
that's like your main tool.
Absolutely. And, when you
And
use yeah, when your voice is your livelihood, like you know all the tricks to get your voice back in a pinch. If you're sick, you can crush up some aspirin, put on your tongue, and that'll get you through a 2-hour show. Like I know all the tricks. And none of these were doing anything. It was clear that there was something going on that needed like a major fix, not a quick one.
oh man, I listened to your podcast episode about Ariel and I thought that was so great.
Yeah, it totally felt like that. It was like, have I sold my soul at the cost of my voice?
And so I think so many people reach this fork in the road,
Yeah.
really. And it's like, what do you do when life hits and you realize all the choices I'm making are not really aligned with who I want to be and who I want to be in the future. And
Yes.
if you keep making the same choices, you're going to be that exact same person in the future. And so then, how did you come to the realization to start making different choices?
Yeah, absolutely. The only answer I can really give to that is I don't think I had another choice.
Right.
My body made the choice for me. It forced me into pause.
Yeah.
And at now, looking back, I can be so incredibly grateful to the higher wisdom of my body that looking back had been giving me signs for quite a while. My gut had been giving me signs for quite some time. You know, when I was younger, I felt like I had incredible intuition. I didn't even really have a word for that, but I
Yeah.
always knew how to listen to my body, listen to my higher knowing. But at some point, I guess my ego took over
Yeah.
and getting caught up in this hustle, work hard mindset, I thought that I knew better than my higher knowledge. And so at some point, I tuned her out and I just did what I guess I'm not blaming society, but I guess what society kind of makes us think we're supposed to do is like you get an education and you work hard and you do all these things and that's how you get ahead in life. That's how you be successful.
And that you can have it all. And
Yes.
you can have it all. I think it was Michelle Obama that said you can have it all. You just can't have it all at the same time.
Yes. So wise.
And we are conditioned to think that we can have it all,
Mhm.
but eventually the cracks start to show, or there's some major
Yes.
health thing or something comes up.
Totally. I've heard this quote before too. We often look to nature for clues as to
Yeah.
how does this work because nature seems to have it all figured out because
Nature was
nature,
giving you the tsunami and was
yeah,
sending all the little animals up the hill. And
yes,
you're just like,
exactly.
oh, look at the wave. Oh,
Yeah, like
shit.
that looks pretty. Yeah, nature
Like the
doesn't
wave behind you, actually.
totally. This is such a great analogy for me. But it doesn't, nature doesn't overthink things. Nature isn't identifying itself as some limiting label. Nature
Yeah,
just is what it is, all encompassing, interconnected oneness. And so it's not overthinking. But unfortunately, we get so disconnected from our true nature that we think and overthink ourselves into pain
yeah,
and strife and disease.
yeah.
And I've heard the quote, nature doesn't work in balance, nature works in harmony.
Right.
And
That's
that
beautiful.
was, yeah, it was so helpful to me to remember that it's not necessarily about this and this and this being equal levels.
Yeah.
It's this may be here and this may have to come down to here so that they can harmonize and all work,
Right.
together.
And what, I mean, imagine how much that resonated with you subconsciously with your
Absolutely.
music background.
The entire universe is music and geometry and harmonics. It's incredible. It's so mathematical, actually. So it wasn't just 6 days, it turned into about 7 weeks
Wow.
of no voice. Multiple specialists, multiple rounds of steroids, which I already don't really believe in taking unless you just have to. And to finally make me see that I just needed to completely hit the brakes. Like I just needed to back up and get a different perspective on everything. And it wasn't until I did that that I saw, wait a second, how did I get here? Like, what choices did I
Right.
even make that got me here? Like, this is not even what I ever wanted to do. Why am I working so hard for this? You know?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think so many of us come to that point in our careers and are
Mhm.
wondering the exact same thing. And on the outside, everything looks perfect.
Yes,
And
it's true.
meanwhile, the wheels are falling off.
Yeah, totally. Which just goes to show at the end of the day, it's kind of irrelevant how much money you're making, what position you have, what title you carry. If inside of it you still feel empty and unfulfilled, then you're
Yeah,
not in alignment.
exactly. So then where did you go from there? The brakes are on. You realize you need to make the change. You need to make
Yeah.
a number of changes. Was that really the reinvention of Julie Jo?
So I would say that was the beginning. And you know
Okay,
how
I
like
love it.
usually yeah, the storm it gets worse before it gets better, you know? Then when I finally was in acceptance that you have to let go. You have to stop
Uh,
doing it your way. Perhaps you don't know what's best for you right now,
right,
and
right.
perhaps you need to take a step back and just listen for a bit to what in whatever form that might come. It might be people around me doing something that I can suddenly see more clearly. It might come from an inner knowing in myself. I already had a meditation practice, but it was kind of hit and miss. My husband had been singing the praises of meditation for years, and because he's my spouse, I kind of didn't listen too much. And
As we do.
finally, as we do, I was having these major panic attacks. When I realized I had to step back from everything, I had a lot of hard phone calls to make. And a lot of them weren't even phone calls because I couldn't speak. I had to like text. And I hate texting something that's like really important, you know?
Oh, yeah.
But it was like, sorry to do this over text. I can't talk. You know, and then someone calling me right away and being like, "We need to talk." I'm like, "I know, but I can't." Like, like, there's a reason why I said
Oh,
I can't talk, you know? But nobody really could understand what I was truly going through because I was holed away, like, trying
yeah,
to kind of figure myself out. Of course, as a mom, I'm still going through the daily grind of all the normal things. On the outside,
yeah.
it looks like I'm still leading a normal life. I'm still coming and going. But when I had my moments of alone time, I was just like, "What is wrong with me? I don't know who I am. I don't know who I got here." Really like identity crisis. And I guess the first thing I began to do was I began to journal every day and I began to be really consistent with my meditation practice of trying to start dropping some of my preconceived notions of who I thought I was. I just started questioning everything. Like, you think you are this singer, but I started to see that that identity of
Yeah.
singer that I was more specifically professional singer that I was clinging to was what was actually causing me so much pain because
Interesting.
whatever was happening in my external reality that didn't seem to reflect professional singer, that would cause me all kinds of reasons to defend myself, need to prove
Mm.
myself, and not just to other people, but also to myself.
Right. Isn't that interesting when you launch into defensive mode? What's
Yes.
really going on there?
Mhm. Mhm.
And it's such a beautiful realization when that hits and you're like,
Yes.
what and who am I defending?
Yes.
And it's usually the ego that's been hit.
Totally.
Oh, well, because it's always the ego when you launch
Yeah.
into defense mode.
Yes, I guess it's the ego because who we truly are is the awareness of all these pieces of ourselves. And that awareness just is. And again, like nature, it's all encompassing. It's oneness with all that is. And how could that ever be truly threatened?
Right.
And so when we are defending, it's always this little ego identity that we have defined ourselves to be that now is trying to prove that label or that identity. And so the more I began to step back and say, oh, I am actually much more than singer, mom, wife. And those are all wonderful things to be, but they're not who I am. At my true essence, I encompass so much more than
Right.
that. And if I could drop all of those labels and just be who I am and express who I am through these roles of singer, through this role of mom, through this role of wife, through this role of friend, through this role of helper at the PTA bake off this morning. You know, I can still be who I am no matter what role I'm playing in this 3D external reality.
And then you're always coming across as authentic. And
Yes.
authentic is so much more appealing and
Yes.
attractive and meets our core needs as humans to
Absolutely.
be seen as our authentic selves and to have that person across from us also be their authentic selves. You
Mm.
know where you land. And
Yes.
and then you know, like our the person who taught us our podcasting class, she says something about you may not be everyone's cup of tea, but
Right.
everyone's not your cup of tea either. And when you
Yes.
show up as your authentic self, then you really get to weed out the noise and weed out those people who are mirroring back to you stuff you don't even like because you're not
Mm.
showing up as you in the first place.
It's so true. And people pleasing plays
Oh,
into that so much.
yeah, I got a minor degree in people pleasing or a major,
I think I did too. I didn't even know I was taking that class.
right? Excelled in that class, straight A's.
Yes. Yes, me too. Yeah, and we just can't be all things to all people. I mean, we were setting ourselves up for failure from the beginning. We couldn't see that there's no way to be everyone's cup of tea. So, why not be the most authentic version of yourself and then you actually give other people the chance to decide if you are their cup of tea or not. And that was what my intuitive counselor friend helped me to see was, do you see by trying to, because I was playing in multiple bands, it's like you're trying to juggle all this. You're trying to be what everyone needs you to be in all of these, but you're not really being yourself in any of them. And in that, you're actually not doing anyone any favors. Like,
Right.
that's not fair to the audience. It's not fair to your bandmates. It's not fair to the band, the venue. No one, if you're not being true to yourself. And I just couldn't see that perspective before.
Well,
I
no, and you'd realized a fair amount of success
Yes,
by
it's
doing
true.
that because the hustle culture,
Mhm.
you realize success that way. You
Yes.
don't realize the level of true success that you can get to, I feel.
Mhm. Mhm.
But there's a reason why people do that and continue doing that is because you can reach a pretty good level of success. But then
Absolutely.
your internal barometer is pretty low.
Mhm. Mhm. That's a really good point to bring up. Yeah, it's that it can work until
Yeah.
it doesn't.
Like then you've got all the money to buy the yacht and you buy the yacht and
Mhm.
you wonder why you're still miserable.
Exactly. Yes. I never had the yacht, but luckily I saw
I imagine you with a yacht.
that's well, I do a lot of
Funnily
yacht rock.
enough, that's why
Did
it's so easy to imagine you with a yacht. That's one of your
exactly.
bands.
Exactly. But see, by being my authentic self, this is actually gonna be really funny segue, is that I started not seeking out. I started just being my authentic self, just being true to myself every day and not hustling. And what started happening was the phone started ringing and people started seeking me. And, that's how I got the job with that yacht rock band. And at first I was like, "No, thanks. I'm not really looking for another band." And they were like, "Well, let me show you our schedule and, let me show you what we make in a year." And I was like, "Oh, let's chat." And suddenly it kind of fit all the check boxes of what I had been telling the universe for 5 or 6 years that I wanted, but I wasn't letting the universe bring it to me because I was trying so hard to do it the way that I thought it was supposed to happen that I was actually blocking the flow of it just coming to me. And
Right.
so suddenly it just came to me. And then, so I was going to make a joke that, I never bought my own yacht, but now I get to go and sing on other people's yachts all the time wearing a captain's hat. So it's kind of
That's
funny.
hilarious. So I think what might be helpful for people is because it's often hard. when people say, well, it just came to me or the
Mhm.
opportunities come to me, what did that exactly look like for you? I think it's easy to say it, but then when you're in that mode of not knowing yet how that feels and what
Mhm.
that looks like, how did
Mhm.
that show up for you? You were just sitting at home, you had the mindset shift, and all of a sudden the phone rang. Like,
Yeah, that's a very
give
good
us an
question.
example.
Yes. So I'll tell you exactly how this one happened. But the first thing I did was drop the need for anything to happen. And when I
Right.
was no longer attached to the outcome, it
Oh,
freed
that's
up
yeah, that's
the,
important.
yes, it freed up the flow of the universe to be able to say, okay, now that you're not, blocking it with your way of putting your blinders on and shutting off all other possibilities because you think you're the only one that knows the best way for this to happen, which is through hard work and time and all these other kind of 3D beliefs that
Yeah.
we think that time is linear and the only thing for stuff to happen is in that way. And then when you kind of just choose not to subscribe to that anymore and say, I'm just gonna be. I'm not going to worry so much about my doing right now. When I feel the divine inspiration to do something, I will do it. So I was feeling divinely inspired to be true to myself, be more present with my kids, be more loving wife to my husband, to consistently practice my meditation every single day, to move my body every single day because my body deserves that.
Yeah.
She feels better when I move her every day, when I eat
Yeah.
more nutritious foods instead of not eating all day and maybe having a vodka soda at night and not sleeping at all. It's like your body doesn't do too well when you're treating it like that. So I
Yeah.
started nourishing the things that were the most important, like physical health and relationship with my family. In the time of doing that, seeds that you could say I had planted a long time before that, before I started to come to any of this realization, started sprouting. And so throughout my 5 or 6 years of networking, as I mentioned, I had been working with several bands. And part of that was that mindset that I always had, always accept an invitation if you can, always be networking. And it's like you told me when I'm going on tour with my band, you said how many great opportunities and people you can meet for your podcast. And
Yeah.
that's the kind of mindset that we're talking about because through each opportunity that I had, I always had the mindset of what other potential relationships or future endeavors could this help connect me with? One guitarist and I had both been substitutes for someone else's band. And we had driven out to Palm Desert, and this guy just occasionally called us when his regular people couldn't perform with him. This was the first time that this guitarist and I had ever performed together. And it's one of those things, hey, nice to meet you. Nice to meet you. Are these the songs we're doing today? Okay, great. How do you do this? Do you repeat the chorus here? Oh, okay. 5 minutes of talking through songs, do a 2 to 3 hour show. And then, okay, well, it was nice to meet you. Hope we get to work together again someday. We went our separate ways. A year goes by and I have identity crisis. I'm quitting everything. I'm home meditating and eating nourishing food. And I get a
With a
message.
little
Exactly. But still keeping my eyes open to, okay, universe, show me because you know better than I do. Like, what am I supposed to be doing right now? I got a message on Instagram one day from that guitarist that said, hey, I remember working with you a year ago. You were amazing. I didn't even know what your name was. I had to call the guy we performed with to find out who you were from a year ago. But my band is looking for a new female singer. And I remember that you were great to work with. You want to come audition for us? And as I mentioned, at first it was kind of, oh, I don't know. And then we kind of started talking details. But that was practically how that one came to be. And then when they started saying, oh, it's already an established band, you don't have to build it from the ground up, all these things that I had been hoping to just fall into when I moved
yeah.
to
Yeah.
California, suddenly 6 years later, it literally was like, it felt like I woke up and it fell into my lap. Now,
Amazing.
I had laid plenty of groundwork before that for it to feel like suddenly I was just so lucky, you know?
Right? You were preparing for your ship to come in.
Right.
And so you were prepared when the ship did come in.
Yes.
You could recognize it and jump on it. And so maybe there was a synchronicity there, but you were
Yes.
prepared for to
To receive it. Yeah.
yeah, to receive it. That's it. That's
Yes.
the word, to
Yes,
receive it.
yes. I that is a very important distinction for us to point out that it's not about it wasn't because I was sitting home doing quote unquote nothing that
Right.
it happened to me. I was actually doing the most important, which was taking off my need or my connection to the outcome and still laying the groundwork every day of keeping my body healthy, keeping my
Yeah.
voice healthy, and making sure I was in a good mental state to be able to step into something new.
Yeah, and to receive.
Yeah.
You were open to receiving is so huge.
Mhm.
And when you think of these things coming in as that you're receiving these synchronicities and these gifts and this luck and being open to receive
Yeah.
is great. I mean, you had to do a fair amount of getting out of your own way to do it.
Absolutely. That's what it all came down to. And the cool thing about once you start to align to who you truly are, like we talked about, is the people who you're really meant to connect with, it's like the pathway is no longer blocked. Like now you're able to be drawn to the people who are on the same wavelength as you. Guests for your podcast just come to you and it's not just about the podcast. It's usually
Yeah.
about much bigger things, right? It's funny how I'm already seeing so we've only been doing our podcasts since January, and already it's like I am open to these new relationships all the time, which are leading to all these other connections in my life
Right?
that some of them have nothing to do with the podcast, but it actually came from the podcast.
Right? I'm noticing this as well, and it's super fun. Like what's opening up because of the podcast, and it gives us just an excuse to reach out to someone who we find interesting or to talk to someone we find interesting.
It's so beautiful, you know?
Absolutely. I wanted to touch on some of the things that I've heard you talk about in your podcast, and it links into what we're talking about now, but you used a term called radical responsibility. And
Yes.
I loved that. I love
Mhm.
that as a term. And maybe you can share with us a little bit about what you mean by that.
Mm.
How do we practice it? Why do we want to practice it?
Mhm, mhm, mhm. It has become my truth and my system of belief that what we attract into our lives are actually the necessary catalysts for us to evolve and grow. I personally believe that we as a soul, as an energetic being before we came into this human existence with a body and this 3D avatar that we knew kind of lessons that our soul needed a little help with learning. And throughout our lives, whether we're doing it consciously, subconsciously, or unconsciously, we are consistently attracting the people and events in our lives that will help us to learn those lessons and to kind of grow and evolve to the next level. And in order for any kind of growth to begin, I think the first step is accepting that everything that's happening in your life is happening for you, not to you. Because otherwise, we just get ourselves stuck in some sort of a victim mentality. And as long as we want to stay there, there's no growth or evolution that can happen. And so
Yeah.
by taking radical responsibility for all the things that happen in our life, the good, the bad, and the ugly, we can actually see how those things are working for us. You can see how different characters in your life, so to speak, are playing a role for you. They're mirroring something for you that's inside of you that is triggered by that person. That if it wasn't triggered by them, you didn't even realize that was hiding in you. You didn't
Right.
realize those are pieces of yourself that you buried. So that's kind of My definition of radical responsibility is not blaming any outside person or thing for anything that you feel like is happening to you. But instead, I like to constantly ask myself the question, what lesson is life offering to me at this moment?
Right?
uh,
Why is this happening for me? And
yes.
especially if you're going through something really tough. And
Mhm.
humaning can be really tough. There's some
Yes.
really, really challenging situations that happen, and
Mhm.
not discounting any of that.
I do think that often when we're in real pain and trauma or just a really hard point, that exact moment is not the time of evolution and growth. That's real human pain. It's coming through our senses. That pain is real, and it's okay to take the time that's needed to just feel through it, because if we block it or we try to immediately see the lesson that it's offering, we're not really allowing that to be processed and felt. And so often I feel like it's hard to even ask that question of what is this offering me until we're kind of beyond the hump of the pain. It
Oh, that's such a good point.
Well, I think it is important to note that we all go through pain and hard times, and in those moments of the pain, we can't really stop the pain to say, I know this is serving me and I know this is for my higher good. And in fact, if anyone from the outside tells you that, you're probably going to punch them in the face. Like
Right.
that's not the
Right.
time. You're not open to receiving that when you're in the rawness of the pain of something that you're going through. And so I
Yeah, so
think,
true.
yeah, I think we do have to accept that pain as we're going through it, it can't be avoided. We can't go around it, can't go under it. We're going to have to go through it. And by going through it, we allow that humanness to truly be felt and processed. When we begin to come through that, it's not like, okay, I'm okay, I went through it. There's still wounds there. But I think as soon as we have the capacity to be able to, I mean, practically speaking, what that looks like is begin to focus on your breath. I'm here right now, and there is no immediate threat to my world. I am feeling pain, but I am alive. I'm here. From that space, if we can continue to focus on what's right here in front of us, we can begin to expand and have a little bit more space and a little bit more space. And with
So
time,
that's almost like a radical being in the present moment. And in
yes,
this exact present moment, not in the past, not in the future, in
totally.
this exact moment.
Yes, and radical responsibility also means I recognize that in this moment, I am not in an evolution mode. I am in survival mode in this moment. And that is what my humanness, that is what my spirit, my soul, that is what I need right now is to, it pertains to my immediate threat right now, which is I am going through something really heavy. And to recognize that there is a time for that. And then there's also a time when we can step back into life force energy, the giving, the radiant energy. And that's where we will get to eventually.
That's beautiful. And a nice way of looking at when we're looking at this is not happening to you, but for you.
Mhm.
That's not discounting the feeling of it and
Exactly.
feeling the pain and going through.
Totally.
Yeah, that's such a good distinction. Before we wrap up, you had said you had talked about being your brightest light. And what I love, even in your podcast title, is star potential.
Hmm. Yeah, I feel qualified to talk about this now because I've walked through it myself. And a little bit of what we touched on is that we can't be all things to all people. But I do feel that there are pieces of ourselves in each other. as well. We all come from this universal cosmic energy that is all connected. We cannot deny that we exist in relationship to our world. We exist in relationship to each other, in relationship to our space around us. I am not just here floating in space. I'm in this closet, which I've turned into a studio. So therefore, I do not exist in this moment outside of the relationship to where I am in this closet. And the stars in the sky, we all exist in this vast space, but it's not just the stars there, that we have to also account for the empty space that's holding those stars. So if we look at all that and say it's all together, it's all one. Nothing exists outside of relationship to other things. This is a roundabout way of saying that we know with science that we are made up of the same elements that the stars are made out of. And so I like to think of us as being made of stardust. It's like these burned stars. They lived their life, and then they burned up, and the ashes fell to the ground. Somehow they were attracted to the magnetic pole of Earth's core, and over eons and eons turned into all these different things, and energy is never destroyed, it's only transferred. And over time these stars became us. And so we literally are stars, each of us. Now, the little twist here is that I'm a little girl that grew up always wanting to be a star. And as I began to have my identity crisis, and you could also just say it was a spiritual awakening. It's like that's the negative side of looking at it and the positive side of looking at it. There's always, two angles to look at it. But the positive of me falling apart was being able to see that I was able to question, what does it truly mean to be a star? And so I began to question, well, what is a star? A star is a guiding light in the sky. A star is something other stars can look to and see. It's a point of reference. It's sometimes it goes together with other stars and makes something incredibly beautiful that others are able to see as a constellation when you put all those stars together. So a star is not something that's better than or necessarily different from anyone else. It's just something that shines with its internal light, which is often caused by the reflection from other
Right.
sources of light.
Yeah,
And
I
so,
love that.
yeah, maybe being a star is just being able to hold space and reflect the light of others back to them. And in doing that, I'm in a giving and receiving relationship. This person feels better. I feel better. We all feel better because we're not trying to be something that we're not. We're just being.
Oh, that's so beautiful. And I always love to close our podcast with words of wisdom from my guest. And that feels like such words of wisdom and such
Yeah.
so aligned with who I know you to be and knowing of your story. That's really great. Thank you so much for sharing. Are there any other words of wisdom you'd like to share before we wrap up?
I would just say one of my main themes that I want to leave people with is don't be afraid to play. Like, don't be afraid to just question everything and say, what if I did this differently than I've always done it? And just have fun with that. And in doing that, we break up these parameters that we think define us. And sometimes we break open a whole new wing that we didn't know existed. And we're able to find different parts of ourselves, which just enriches your life and just makes it more fun.
Oh, absolutely. And then, like, who doesn't want to hang out with somebody who's more fun,
It's
right?
true.
And it also gives people a place to go. If you're down in the dumps, often people will come down in the dumps with you. And if you're
Yeah.
feeling in a great energy, then people will rise up to that. So thank you for always being such a great place for me to go. And I hope for our listeners as well. And appreciated you so much being on the podcast today.
Thank you so much for having me, Shannon. I always love our conversations, and it's fun to have an official one.
Yes, exactly. Well, thank you so much. And until next time. Thank you so much for listening. I hope that you got something out of the show. If you'd like to connect with Julie Jo, her details are in the show notes. And if you enjoyed this episode, please like, subscribe, follow, leave a comment or a review, and this will help even more people access these inspirational stories. Have a wonderful week and see you next week.